like to introduce, again, we have some chief investment officers from leading agencies. So we have David Campanelli from Horizon Media. We have Carrie Drinkwater from Mediahub. We have Adam Gerber from Essence. We have Stacey Stewart from We have Catherine Warburton from 360i Dentsu. I hope that they've all joined. I don't see them live on the screen yet, but our tech folks will work their magic. So let me tee this up. First, I think we should open up by reacting to the first panel. We're looking at the next 5 years, but I think in my preamble, I said, like, you know, one of the cool things, if there's an upside to this crisis we went through, is that it forced a lot of digital transformation for organizations. Everything from product sales and retail to media interfaces. And I think that was a good thing. But what I heard in that first panel, to me, frankly, was a little bit like rearranging the demographic deck chairs on the Titanic. And I heard the A&E folks talk about archaic demographics. I applaud them for their move to outcome-based guarantees. You know, I know the proof is in the pudding on a lot of that stuff, but I'd really like to ask this panel to open up with this idea. I specifically asked Adam Gerber if he could be on this panel because he was participating in a session SIM did, the Coalition on Innovative Media Measurement, a month or so ago, where he kind of put the fire under their butts and said, you know, this is a time for wholesale transformation. You know, if we're not going to do this now, when two things, we have a crisis to motivate us, but B, we really fundamentally need to make change. I've covered the Upfront since 1983. You could do the math on that. And since 1983, we've been talking about transforming it. We've been talking about changing the rules of order. We've been talking about doing away with it or not. And fundamentally, very little has changed. And I have a few follow-up questions on that to see what it'll be like 5 years from now. But I'd like to get you all to open up on whether, you know, we should even be having this demographic harangue in 2021. And what will things be like 5 years from now? Will we fundamentally change the way we do business in the Upfront? Or is this another one of these, you know, rhetoric points for us? I'd like to open with Adam, since you're the main reason I framed that.
That's a lot to respond to. I'm a little worried that I have to go first. I guess I get to set the stage whether this is going to be just a casual conversation or we're really going to get into it. I just wanted to let John Musinski know that in 5 years, we're going to actually be guaranteed on adults or people 2+. That's the new demo that we're going to be buying. Thanks. The networks are going to move us to people 2+. No, look, I think if anyone's paying attention, our industry is broken. If you're paying attention to the TV space and the audience erosion that's occurring, and you dig deep into the numbers and understand the frequency distribution and the changes that have occurred in kind of how audiences are delivered, especially those under 50, you know that this is not sustainable. And what's manifesting in front of our eyes this year especially is, you know, just what I would call the start of the breakdown of kind of the way that we used to buy TV. And it's got to change. Today, OpenAP announced a significant initiative around OpenID. It's not anywhere near where it needs to be, but it's a start, and we need to move away from the way that we buy units and GRPs, and we have to recognize we're moving to a world of much less ad load, a much more fragmented marketplace where, you know, it's not just going to be the big four networks that deliver the audience, and we've got to figure out how to optimize across all the different video environments that we're going to need to be incorporating into our clients' plans.
Okay, so great rallying cry. I'd like to know how the rest of the panelists think about whether we can actually put some money where our mouths are and make change, and what areas specifically need to be made. We're talking a lot about audience measurement and guarantees. Let's continue with that, and we could get into other rules of order. Anyone? Dave, Catherine, Carrie, Stacey?
Sure, I'm happy to jump in. I mean, I agree with a lot of what Adam was saying, and the need to make changes. But there's also the part of the reason why we're kind of stuck in this repeating pattern is there is a need to have a common denominator to price against and understand, not only over time, but network to network, property to property, the relative pricing of these of what we're buying. So that's a dynamic that is part of why we're continuing along this path, and it completely needs to change and evolve and expand beyond what we're doing. But there is that kind of central need. And I also agree with what the previous panel was saying to a large degree. Buying upfront, if we're just simply talking about the upfront, buying ahead of time has value. Locking in the desired inventory has value. Locking in a price for the next 12 months has value to our marketers. Our marketers have a lot of pricing variables. We have a Little Caesars as a client, and they're always talking about the price of cheese going up or down, impacting their business, right? If they could fix that price of cheese for the year, that would be a win for them. We can fix their price of media for the year with an upfront deal. So there is value to those components of it. Having said that, all the stuff Adam was talking about is incredibly important, and we have to get past standard demos, and we have to move in a direction where we're considering broader audiences, we're considering fluidity across platforms. In 5 years from now, I think we should be in a place where we're not talking about a linear spend versus a digital spend. We should be talking about a spend with a media platform like an NBC Universal and how they can reach the audience that we're trying to desire. And we have to stop thinking in terms of these narrow networks and whether linear versus digital.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Oh, sorry,
I'll go
Catherine.
after Carrie. You go first, Carrie.
All right. I mean, what I'll say is that television, TV content clearly works for all of our advertisers because there is money chasing it. And it's not chasing it because we need GRPs. We're chasing it because it impacts our business. And we see our clients have demand in those spaces because we're seeing a business results guarantee on the back end. So we do need to figure out how to make the economics work better, just echoing the sentiments of what everyone was saying. And to what Ro was saying before, the lead in, we've done business results guarantees and we've done them for almost 3 years. And that has been powerful and impactful. And it's a way to change the conversation. But until TV and content stops working, and until our clients are saying, please put my money there because it's working, help me invest smarter and better, I don't see the dynamics changing unless we have this windfall and the world changes, which we saw it just did, and the supply far outweighs the demand. Sorry, Catherine, didn't mean to cut you.
No worries. I think that it is just such an interesting time in our industry because, Adam, to your point, the way we plan and buy, the way we did it in the past just doesn't work anymore. Everything will be addressable soon. And then it's what's the price you're willing to pay for that person in that environment. And then what is it doing for you? And the hardest thing I think that our clients are grappling with is as the linear television ratings continue to decline, you do not have that one place to go to get that broad, unduplicated reach, which forces a different perspective in your strategy and your planning. And I also think that with the rise of addressability, it puts more importance in that consideration, that middle bucket of the funnel, like what can these video types do for our advertisers in that consideration that will drive down to the bottom of the funnel, to Carrie's point, to drive business outcomes. So there's a lot of opportunity, but a lot has to change in order for us to move forward. So.
Okay, well, I don't want to make this an complete harangue on audience measurement and get too in the weeds, but we started there. And I think David mentioned an important point about a common currency. So, but we still have the chance for a reset. You have a lot of innovative things going on. Adam mentioned Open AP's Open ID. You have the promise of Nielsen One. you have ComScore doing things, you have all kinds of data facilities trying to figure out how to shed new light and value on the currency. But fundamentally, what we've been buying for decades is GRPs. So how do you deal with that when you're moving into an environment where it's multiple devices, multiple interfaces, different ad loads, different user experiences? Not all of them are 100% viewable like we've had in television all the time on the screen. So what is going to be this common currency construct in 5 years, to stick with that theme? What will it look like? Adam says it's persons 2+. I predict it will be persons prenatal plus, but you guys tell me.
Do you want me to start off again, or do we want to rotate?
Yeah, by the way, Zoom is a different format for me, but I kind of like live extemporaneous, everybody jump in, and we'll figure it out from there.
Okay. I mean, I want to build off something Catherine talked about. Actually, I think everyone alluded to it, but Catherine came right out and said it, which is, we're moving to a world where 5 years from now, I would argue the bulk of everything that we're all buying is going to be impression-based and addressable, data informed. There will still be unit-based media. The sports leagues aren't going to go addressable. They're going to sell sponsorships. Big tent poles are going to continue to sell units and shows, but the vast majority, in my view, of the entertainment content is going to be consumed on demand, and it's going to be addressable. So in that world, I would posit that actually the way we think about measurement today is obsolete. We don't need it. I don't need Nielsen measuring my campaign after the fact if throughout the whole campaign I was using OpenID to ensure that the audience that I was targeting and delivering in real time was queuing up to the audience segment that I wanted to reach. I'd already know who I reached, because I'd be using a real-time activation-based measurement solution, not a post facto, did I actually deliver it? And, so I think there are a lot of questions we need to think about with regards to what this new addressable model looks like. How do the point David brought up around consistent currency and understanding the marketplace is absolutely correct in today's world. But in tomorrow's addressable world, when everything is dynamic, there's no way to forecast what inventory is going to be available at any given time if everyone is addressing and targeting specific segments. So, the notion of how you forecast the marketplace, today we do that one-dimensionally. We just know how many units there are. We model out ratings. We assume we know how much audience will be available in the marketplace at any given time. In the future, you're going to have to know the other side of that equation, which is who are all the advertisers that are bidding for those segments at any given point in time during any flight that you might be competing for audience for at the same time. We're moving into a much more complicated space where the way that we use measurement today is going to be completely kind of turned on its head. And so I don't have the answer. I'm just telling you, I think it's going to be a hell of a lot more complicated 5 years from now.
And also, as we talk about addressability, I think we all often talk about that future state of 100% or near 100% addressability as a good thing. And I worry that it's not all good. As Carrie was saying, TV works. We know TV has worked for a long time, and it still works even at its diminished state for many advertisers. And part of the reason why it works is because, yeah, we might be targeting 18 to 49, but we're reaching people outside of that. And those people still go out and buy our products, whether they're in our target or not. And the more narrow we target and directly address, we're missing that halo effect of the incremental impressions that we're reaching through our linear TV and the unit-based model. So if we over address and we're missing that, how is that going to impact our business results? How is that going to impact how we go to market? So it's a concern about over addressability, I think, when we get to that state, and how does that look and how does that impact our business? And to Adam's point, yeah, on the pricing dynamic completely changing. I mean, it's a challenge with addressable right now. I'm sure we've all been in a situation where we've tried to sell addressable television to a client and it's been a $123 CPM or a $375 CPM because the target is so narrow. And oftentimes they just can't quite compute, like, I can pay $8 over here, $123 over here. So yeah, a lot of that goes away, and there's going to be a huge learning curve, not only for all of us who are in it every day, but certainly for our clients who have to deal with the impact of that and understand it. Is going to be a huge learning curve as we move into that fully addressable world.
I agree with that. I think as we think, and I think Catherine mentioned this, that broad unduplicated reach is going away, really. I mean, as we see the decline of linear TV, it's harder and harder to find that. And I do agree that that middle funnel becomes apparent. And I think addressability, as we think of more one-to-one, also you do lose that. So how are we living in that middle funnel to still bring in that broad reach, but still deal with that addressability on that more one-to-one basis is going to be key in this fragmented world that we're all living in.
So what I didn't hear is how you account for and assign value to these different kinds of reach in these different interfaces and platforms. I mean, Essence is partly an experience design agency, partly a media agency. Aren't there differences here? And last geek out question on audience measurement, is the MRC's duration weighted viewable impression the way to do it? And I think that comes on stream this year. But isn't that the right way? You have this Rosetta Stone that accounts for, this is a tablet viewing experience, this is a OTT experience, this is a linear TV experience, and that they compute to this common denominator that you can then assign supply and demand values against.
I'm a big believer, at least 5 years ago, I was a big believer in independent third-party measurement. But I wonder, to Adam's point, if we start chasing individuals and then we're chasing those individuals and looking at the business outcome, doesn't matter what the MRC said about how long someone was viewing. But the reality, to Dave's point, is for some of our advertisers, it's going to become very costly. Like if you have a very broad reaching CPG advertiser who really wants, like toothpaste, really wants to reach anybody who has teeth, the price point of this media, does that start becoming the concern when you're going out with broad reach? But I do feel like there has to be someone, a third party, independent third party, sort of policing, and I hate to use that word policing, validating how many people were reached. Will fraud become more of an issue in the future? It's already an issue in many types of digital, but in the world of CTV, less so. It could become more prominent. But I hear what you're saying, Joe. I feel like it's almost like a reset in how we're approaching everything. But to Adam's point, I still get these plans and these cost exercises for daytime television on this network. What is this going to be priced like? If the clients still are measuring us that way, it impairs us from evolution and impairs their business from evolving.
I think to Joe, to sort of add on to that, to what Catherine's saying, I think it's a creative opportunity more than an equalizing of impressions. If I know where it's being served on what platform or to who is seeing it, what age, what your experience is, I think that's a tremendous creative opportunity for what you're serving them. Or if you have a brand within a portfolio that would speak to them more directly. So rather than looking at it as an equalizer, I think we could look at it as an opportunity for creative implications.
Also makes it more complex and nuanced. Are you prepared to manage massive amounts of inventory that way?
Well, there's enough technology now. I mean, dynamic creative technology that helps us to do that. So, and I think we need to be, capitalizing on the technology and on those different experiences to have that one-on-one, but make it, it's a democratization of eyeballs, but bringing them together for mass.
Okay, let's move out because we could do the whole discussion on valuation and media measurement. Well, let's talk about how fundamentally, or whether things will fundamentally change 5 years from now. So let me ask my favorite question. I like to ask at every one of these sessions, which is, in 5 years, will you still be registering your clients' budgets with the networks? And actually, more importantly, will you also be registering them with Google, Amazon, Roku, whoever's next, Tubi TV, you name it, and why?
So go ahead.
Sorry,
Dave.
I was just gonna say, I kind of jumped the gun a little bit earlier, talking about 5 years down the line, but that need to have foresight and lock in pricing and what you've purchased for the next 12 months plus is valuable. And so from that aspect, and you see the digital side with the new fronts moving honestly more in that direction than we're seeing the traditional TV move in the opposite direction, away from an upfront. Is it going to be the same upfront? No, it shouldn't be the same upfront. Are we going to be registering budgets? I suppose so, but I think they will be, as I said before, much more holistic budgets with a platform or a media company versus prescribed budgets by day part, by network at different CPMs. So I think the need will be there, and I think buying ahead of time is still going to be a benefit to many advertisers. But I think how we're doing it obviously will continue to evolve. And I think we early on you said something about it being the upfront today fundamentally the same as when you started covering it a few years ago. And I guess that's true, but it's changed a lot. I mean, the stuff that we think about and have to negotiate and deal with as buyers and sellers is dramatically different than it was even a few years ago in terms of the level of detail and the nuance and the how data has impacted it. So it has changed quite a bit at the same time too.
Okay, so what other aspects of the market structure do you think, well, let me phrase it differently. What would each of you like to see changed in terms of pick one aspect of the marketplace that you'd like to use this crisis opportunity, this transformational year to change and have the business operate differently 5 years from now? Let's start with Stacey, since I haven't called on you enough, I don't think.
Of course, I think I would love to see the silos broken down again between TV, digital, CTV, streaming. I would like to see the silos broken down. I think that's imperative to everyone's success, as well as measurement and how we reach our audiences. I think the timing, I agree with long-term deals being beneficial to clients, but I think the timing can always be a challenge. I think we saw the ANA last year call attention to wanting to shift to a calendar year. I think that was largely ignored in the marketplace for the most part. I think the timing works for some, it doesn't work for others, and it's very rigid. And doesn't align with the flexibility that a lot of clients need for their businesses.
I'd like each of you to answer this. What is your one big wish? And then we'll follow up and drill down.
So I'll go with I don't think this is what you're looking for, Joe, so I apologize, but I hope our industry looks different. I mean, you look at our boxes and look, we all look the same. So I truly hope that these boxes look different. I hope our organizations look different. I hope we think different. And I think this year has helped us see that. So that's my hope.
I'd like to see a better use of technology. So as Carrie was saying, in creative, we have the opportunity to use AI and creative versioning. I would like to see even further evolution of technology to help with, let's face it, the entry-level jobs, the people that we take out of college, they're still doing such menial tasks. Like, let's use data and technology to better enable our businesses.
I mean, I'd like to see people start being a little bit more transparent about what they're really selling me. And I could take that in a whole host of different directions. But I'll cite a few things. I do think that, we're moving from a world where we bought schedules and knew exactly where our commercials were running to a world where we're buying rotations essentially of impressions across either lineups or channels or genres or platforms or, roll-ups of content. And that creates a lot of challenge, especially as consumption fragments out across lots and lots of different content, both from a brand safety perspective and from just, back to the point that I think Carrie was making about creative. Like, if I know where I'm running, I can tailor a message to a more relevant environment. So transparency around, where we're running, I think is something that the streaming services of the platforms are really going to have to kind of work on in terms of delivering for us. And the other thing I'd say is there's a lot of misrepresentation going on in the marketplace right now, especially with regards to this concept of reach extension and how it's being positioned. There is a consumer doesn't come home and just say, I'm only going to watch my pay TV service. So everything that happens within my pay TV service is where reach extension can occur. People watch across their traditional cable platforms. They watch, the streaming services. They watch digital video. I need to look at the whole video experience in terms of planning and buying reach extension. And the sooner that the suppliers and the technology platforms recognize that and start building solutions that enable us to look at it that way, the better. But right now, most of the pitches I hear are, yeah, we're gonna deliver reach extension, but it's only within this compartment of video, and it ignores the rest of the reality that consumer or viewer is having with other content that they're engaging with on either their big screen or their smaller screens.
Dave, did you have a wish?
Sure. Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me, at least as it relates to the upfront, I guess I kind of phrase it as the decentralizing of the negotiation process. I think the worst part about the upfront and what, as buyers, we do a disservice to ourselves is when we all line up. Agency X did a deal with Network X last night, so we all got to jump in and we got to get our in before it closes and the rates go up or whatever. That frenzy that we create and kind of oftentimes walk into of our own volition gives up so much control from our end to the sales side, and a decentralizing of that, which kind of happened last year, right? Upfront, as it took place last year, some deals may have been done in July and some got done in August and some got done in September. That kind of decentralizing and pulling it apart so there's not that artificial, and it's 99.9% artificial pressure to come to market when everyone else is, when NBC's closing their deals or when Disney's closing their deals, will do us all a benefit from a pricing standpoint, from a executing thoughtful deals instead of rushing at times. I think that's the biggest thing I would like to see change.
Well, to follow up, that's an excellent point. I think Stacey was alluding to that too, which is, I said I covered a lot of upfronts and I've covered a lot of recessions and wars and nudge networking, negotiation, upfront discussion groups and A&A meetings. And, A&A last year talking about changing the market timing, and nothing changes. I think within that, we forget there are different cycles in the upfronts. There's a news upfront, a sports upfront, a kids upfront. There are all kinds of negotiations going on all the time. But I think in principle, we're talking about this big stampede mentality. So this is the year, to the earlier point, about wholesale change. You're in the driver's seat. Isn't this the time to make a change? And then the question is, what do you structure the timing around if you do have all these different market needs? I think the network season was originally built around the launch of the new automotive models, right? I mean, we're still living with that legacy. How do we change this, and what should it look like in 5 years?
I think that the scarcity of supply is what drives that stampede. So if we don't have a scarcity of supply, or we're measuring it differently, then we won't have that stampede. And I know that for my clients, and I'm guessing for all of these agency clients, they want to operate on their own fiscal year, and they want flexibility. So they don't, to Stacey's point, they don't want to necessarily replicate in the digital world, and they haven't to date, the same type of firmness of commitment. So they want more flexibility in their digital commitments. With that flexibility will come a different cadence, I believe, in how we do our deals. Now that is sort of a rude awakening for like a legacy broadcast partner that is used to having about 65% of their upfront orders firm. It's difficult to go from a 65% firm situation to, I don't know, let's make it up, 20% firm. So that changes the marketplace in itself. And I think, Joe, you had mentioned like a Google or a Facebook. Most of our deals in Google and Facebook are 100% cancelable. So we have that flexibility, and that's certainly working for them. They're doing fairly well as far as I can see. So I think that the cadence will change just by nature of the media type, as well as hopefully we will have lots of eyeballs to chase, and we won't have the scarcity of inventory that we have now.
Okay, I'd like to remind the audience, if you could post any questions in the chat bar, we'll either myself or Wayne Friedman will field them in a short while. We're coming down on our timing, unfortunately. There's a lot of areas to cover, but something I was thinking about leading up to this discussion was, over the past year, I've covered a lot about, privacy compliance, the deprecation of cookies, and, I want to give kudos to the TV industry for accelerating a tremendous amount of data targeting innovation in the past few years. It felt like it was catch up, but it feels like you're there now with Open AP and Open ID and all these other developments. But here's the thing, I'm wondering, the deprecation of cookies has also brought back this concept of contextual targeting, which has always been around, always will be. It's an important attribute, but I actually think it might be the best thing ever for the industry, because it's kind of the way we bought media to begin with. And I think it benefits television because the programming environment you're reaching people in. You may not know whether they're really a person 2+ or prenatal or whatever, but you pretty much have a good sense. And my question for all of you is, could this be a good thing, that we're actually going to get less refined in identities and privacy and targeting people individually? I know you talked a lot about addressability, but could contextual be a good trend for the future of television marketplaces? Or is that a bad question?
It's not a bad question. It's just really hard to align to. It's just really hard to scale and align to, I think. Context is great for certain categories, endemic categories, food or B2B advertisers or financial services on CNBC. It makes complete sense. It's a lot harder to do it in a more general market type of environment, show by show, especially if you're in a dynamic model where you really never know kind of where your impressions are falling. So, I think context matters. I think, again, it goes back to I think what Carrie was talking about in terms of creativity. I think there's a huge opportunity to leverage context in real time to, optimize creative messaging and make it more relevant. I want to go back to something else you said and debate it a little bit with you. Maybe this will spur some discussion. I don't think the TV industry has made the strides they need to make with regards to data targeting. I think they've made the strides that they wanted to make to optimize their own yield. It doesn't help me to optimize TV schedules within each individual portfolio's silo. I'm not spending most of my money with one provider. I'm running campaigns and I need to optimize across the entire ecosystem as one complete optimization. And until the networks, and I've said this, I think you heard me say this at the SIM conference, the TV networks have to stop competing with each other and they have to start complementing one another. They have to enable us to optimize our ad campaign delivery across their programming in ways that is the least detrimental to the consumer experience while they're viewing. That means we need to help them reduce ad load. The way you do that is help me run the fewest number of ads I need to run to achieve the reach and the communication goals and the impact that I'm trying to deliver for my business, as opposed to what we're doing today, which is just throwing more and more GRPs at the problem. I mean, I've looked at the data. If you look at the last 10 years, I have to run 4 times as many GRPs against 18 to 49-year-olds to deliver the same 50% reach that I delivered in 2010.
Adam, do you think that's realistic? I mean, a few years ago when Joe Marchese was running Fox, they made a lot of noise about that. But when you looked at the data, they added inventory. They didn't cut it back.
Well, I think you're seeing what's happening. No one's watching linear TV anymore.
Okay.
So if your user experience remains what it is, everyone will be streaming and watching either completely non-ad supported platforms or platforms with 3 to 4 minutes of advertising.
And then on the streaming side, CTV side, the inevitability that the ad loads will increase there as more dollars shift there, and they need to create capacity. It'll shift there, and you know, I'd be willing to bet that that's going to happen. I want it written into all our contracts that our CPMs start going down when that happens, because the big selling point of these premium CPMs in CTV is the 1 minute, 2 minute pods, which has validity to it. But as soon as those start creeping up, our CPMs better come down with it, because that certainly didn't happen in linear TV. But it's a challenge to, we're facing a similar issue that Adam was just describing in linear and looking across the landscape. I mean, I do think there is some value in optimizing within a network, right? There's not enough value, and the greater value is obviously optimizing across networks. But we're starting to see that in the CTV space as well. We're doing direct IOs with individual network groups, and we want to put those in PMPs and be able to optimize and decision and frequency manage across those deals. And they're very resistant to that. So it's an ongoing discussion, but we have to push them in that direction to work across partners for the greater good, and they will all benefit, versus them being concerned that in this particular year I might get slightly less dollars because I optimized out of, you know, the guaranteed amount I was going to get this year.
And Joe, I will say, you did say we're in the driver's seat. I don't think we're in the driver's seat. I think, well, let's hope we're driving together, because until TV stops working, and until that space and what the property is that we want to buy exceeds the demand, we are not in the driver's seat. So I think we need to figure it out together, whether it's demos, whether it's data, whether it's creative excellence, whether it's business results guarantee. But I don't think we're driving those. We're driving it with our clients. But until we can say, you don't need to be there, take that money and move it, I don't see us being, I think it has to be parallel driving or co-driving, or I don't know.
Hey, Joe, there's a question from Jessica O'Brien. She wants to know, will budgets still be distinct for linear, or do you expect even more convergence with CTV or digital video?
Well, I think the panel already answered that, but one of you take that. And
I think there'll be more convergence. I think that one of the challenges in the world today, not 5 years from now, is the fact that we are still using demographic targets in linear TV. And as a result, linear TV for cable is one of the most efficient CPMs. Whereas in CTV, it is not necessarily a very efficient CPM. And to Adam's point, we're buying it as a pool CTV, so we're not exactly sure exactly what we're getting. We're getting there, which is a frustration coming from a former TV buyer, where you get to know exactly what you're getting in TV.
I'd like to follow up on Carrie's point about driver's seat. And this is one of my beliefs after covering the market so long, that there's kind of too much incestuous co-conspiracy going on between not just agencies and networks, but also your clients. So when Nudge failed, it was, you know, I'm not going to name names here, but it was people from the ANA TV committee who went into that meeting and said, what's the problem here? We like buying network TV this way. We have relationships with these people. So here's my question for all of you. One of the weird things about this past year, which put pressure on the upfront, was the lack of physical events. And I've had good sources of mine explain the whole process to me of the smoke and mirror dance of Lincoln Center and the Shrimp Bowls and Radio City Music Hall, and how it builds an appetite and a sense of um, you know, preciousness and commodity allocation, all that stuff. And, you know, we kind of lost that this last year. Are we going to revert back to that stampede mentality when things normalize? Or is this a chance for us to reset and put you guys in the driver's seat where you actually control the market timing in the future?
I don't know if this is controversial or not, but if anyone feels pressure or influenced by the mid-May set of meetings to where we're supposed to spend our money and what time we're supposed to spend our money, then they're not doing their job very well. That is a completely, the events are nice and it's good to see the programming, but less and less that even matters because the shows that they're showing may not even be on in fourth quarter, or I don't know when they're on. They're, you know, programming 365 days a year. So it's a nice event, and it'll be nice to see people in person again and have drinks and everything else. But that has little to no bearing, as far as I'm concerned, on when we're deciding to go to market and how we're going to market.
I agree.
Okay, I think I spooked the audience because we're not seeing any questions, but let me throw this one at you, and I'd like you all to answer it, which is, what do you think might be the most unintended consequence of impacting the marketplace 5 years from now? The thing that will surprise all of us. I mean, you know, we just went through a pandemic. We're still going through it and things are changing. What do you think will be the biggest game changer in 5 years, or is it just going to be business as usual?
I'm going to start with one out of left field because we haven't talked local at all. I think there's a huge change coming to the local TV marketplace because there's no way that the current business models of the broadcast networks can be sustained with the ratings that they're doing. And the local affiliates, why do I need 5? You know, if we're not going to end up with 4 or 5 broadcast networks, I mean, think about it. How are they all going to program 3 hours a night 5 years from now if they're doing a 0.2 rating? Because that's the track we're headed to, 0.2, the rate we're going with the declines we're seeing year over year. You know, at that point, the business becomes unsustainable. So I would argue you'll see consolidation, both in the cable network space and potentially in the broadcast network space. And then why do I need 5 affiliates in every local market if there aren't 4 or 5 broadcast networks to support them from a national perspective? That's going to have huge implications on local news. It's going to have huge implications on every local market. But I think the other thing that's going to drive that is that local marketers don't need the local affiliates anymore to get their message out. They can run digital and streaming based media to deliver at the local level. And so, you know, local TV stations are not the only game in town anymore. So I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on the local marketplace. Unless we have elections every 6 months, then they're fine.
That's what I was going to bring up, Adam, outside of the political time period. I think the game changer, I think we'll see a lot more programmatic. So we are already in the traditional digital space. It's dominated by programmatic. I think that we'll see more CTV, OTT. I don't know, maybe when all linear is addressable, it will become programmatic, which would open up the ability, to Adam's point, of optimizing across media owners. And what a consequence of that will be is the relationships that you were talking about, Joe. The relationships with the seller will not be the same. Already, the relationships with the seller are not the same as they were, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So that's my prediction.
Any others willing to take Carrie?
I mean, I think, sort of echoing a little bit of Adam's sentiment, I think there'll be fewer players in the space, whether it's collapse or acquisition. I think we'll be saying, can you believe it's 5 years and we're still having the same conversation in some sense? I would say gaming will become an integral part of our conversation and its own, maybe its own market. So that would be my 2 cents.
I think we're out of time, but I just want to put Adam's answer together with Catherine's and say that I predict in 5 years, somebody will develop an independent network model aggregating all of the unsold local station inventory via a programmatic interface. Anyway, I want to thank the panel. I don't think we answered all the questions on what the market might look like in 5 years, but I think you put a lot of thoughts out there for people to bristle with over the next few years. And it'll be interesting to see how this year's Upfront pans out, given the conversation we had earlier. I want to thank you all for your time, for participating in the Zoom interface. Hopefully next year we're doing it over some bad coffee at the Yale Club again, but thank you for participating.